There are people who don't need to yell at you or throw insults. A cold stare, a mocking smile, or a casual remark is enough to make you question yourself. They don't need to prove you wrong. They only need you to begin shrinking, and quietly, you start to fade from the story of your own life. Not because you lack worth, but because you forgot who gets to define it. In a world full of noise and judgmental eyes, the most frightening thing isn't that others try to make you feel small, it's the moment you start believing them. We forget that self-worth doesn't come from approval, isn't determined by someone's gaze, but from the firmness of our own mind and the way we choose to face rejection. Stoicism doesn't teach us to be cold. It teaches us to be calm, to live deliberately, to never hand over control of our emotions to anyone but ourselves. So how do we hold on to our worth when words try to shrink us? We begin here. 1. Understand that belittlement stems from insecurity. No one tries to make you feel small because you actually are. They do it because they themselves feel insufficient. Belittling others is not a sign of strength, but a form of defense, subtle, quiet, and often disguised as harmless remarks. That probably isn't for you. Sounds nice, but reality's much harder, or everyone thinks they're special. These aren't pieces of advice. They're sugar-coated needles, and if you don't recognize them, they'll pierce your self-worth little by little. Have you noticed that the ones who put you down are often struggling with their own sense of inadequacy? Truly confident people don't need to dim someone else's light to shine. Those at peace with themselves don't need to make others doubt themselves to feel superior. And if someone keeps making you question your own worth, chances are they're battling their own insecurity, but instead of facing it, they project it onto you. I once knew someone like that. Every time I shared something that excited me, a new project, a budding idea, or simply a moment I felt proud, they would drop a casual comment, not cruel, not rude, but just sharp enough to pull me back. Sounds good, but don't get your hopes up. Yeah, we all used to dream big at your age. And I'd go quiet. I'd lower my gaze, soften my tone, and start wondering, am I being unrealistic? It took me years to realize this. They weren't trying to help me be realistic. They were trying to help themselves feel more comfortable. Because when you dare to believe in something good, when you act from inner conviction, you reflect the stagnation in those who've stopped trying. And their instinct isn't admiration, it's disruption. They don't need you to fail. They just need you not to succeed before they do. And the easiest way to ensure that is to make you doubt yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In this context, it means when someone uses their insecurity to manipulate you, you don't need to retaliate with harm. You simply need not become a reflection of them. You don't need to argue to reclaim your worth. You just need to refuse to play their game, a game where the prize is self-doubt and the cost is you. And here's what you must remember. When you understand that belittlement doesn't come from truth, but from deficiency, you stop getting pulled into emotional whirlpools. Instead of asking, why would they say that? You'll begin to ask, what are they hiding inside themselves? And then instead of feeling hurt, you'll feel compassion, not pity, but clear-eyed empathy. Because those who hurt others don't do so from strength, but from unhealed wounds. You don't need to shrink just because someone else refuses to grow. You don't need to stay silent just because someone else won't listen. And you don't need to dim your light just because it unsettles someone else. True worth doesn't need validation. It only needs your protection. When you understand that, you'll walk with silent strength. You won't need to raise your voice to be heard, won't need to argue to be recognized, and won't need to bow to belong in any relationship. Instead of reshaping yourself to fit someone's distorted view, look directly at the truth. The one belittling you isn't a skilled judge. They're just holding up a warped mirror, and you can choose to step away from it. Because the moment you stop reacting, stop needing to be understood, accepted, or comforted, that's the moment you're truly free. And that freedom, no one can take it from you unless you give it away. 2. Stand firm. Don't let words shake your ground. Some words seem harmless, but leave marks that last longer than any blow. They don't roar, don't come in anger, but fall quietly and seep into your thoughts. Do you really think you're good enough? Maybe you're dreaming too big. And you begin replaying them in your mind like an old recording, not because you believe them, but because you haven't learned how to diffuse them. We're often taught how to react fast, how to come back with sharp replies, how to fight with logic. But few teach us how to stay silent without feeling weak, how to remain steady without proving ourselves. Because this world isn't short on voices. It's short on those who remain calm amid the noise. An old friend once told me, "I heard you're shifting into content creation. Good luck. That field's cutthroat. Everyone thinks they can do it." I smiled, but a ripple of doubt stirred inside me. He wasn't wrong. It is competitive. But why did his words unsettle me? Not because they were true, but because they touched a fear I already carried. The fear of not being good enough. And then I realized, words only defeat you if you allow them to reach the deepest part of you. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "It's not events that disturb us, but our judgment about them." A criticism, seen as information, becomes a lesson. Seen as definition, it becomes a cage. The difference lies in you, not in the speaker. An undisciplined mind will always react instinctively, feeling the need to answer, to be understood, to explain why you've chosen this path. But when you begin to live with intention, you realize you don't need to convince anyone of your worth. You no longer feel the need to justify or seek permission for doing what you know is right. I once observed an old manager who was consistently undervalued by his boss. In meetings, his superior would interrupt, nitpick small details, and try to throw him off balance. But he never raised his voice, never got defensive. He simply answered briefly, nodded, and returned to the work. The result? His team was the most productive. And one day, that very boss asked him for advice on improving other departments. His silence wasn't resignation, it was a strength forged over time. Because sometimes, reacting isn't a sign of vitality, but of dependency. The more you react, the more you lose your inner command. And in the Stoic world, self-command is the beginning of all freedom. It's easy to get caught in emotion when someone insults you, but ask yourself, is what they said true? If not, why am I letting it make me anxious? That question doesn't need a loud answer. It needs to be answered with quiet clarity, a calm silence. No one but you decides what gets to enter your mind. Others may plant seeds, but you're the one who waters them. And if you don't water them, doubt will never take root. You don't need to fight negative words with positive ones. You just need to stay your course. Consistency, even in silence, makes all noise around you feel misplaced. And when that happens, you won't need to win any argument, because you'll have won the most important battle, the one for your own stability. 3. Respond with intentional silence. There are times when the best response is to say nothing at all. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you no longer need to say it. Silence, when chosen with intention, is not a sign of weakness. It is the expression of a mind mature enough to no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Most of us are raised in a society that treats reaction as a measure of strength. If insulted, we should retaliate. If misunderstood, we should explain. If attacked, we should defend. But Stoicism teaches something else. Not everything that happens deserves your energy. And when you begin living by inner standards instead of reacting to the outside world, you'll realize not every situation calls for a voice. Sometimes, silence is the highest form of freedom. I once worked with a lead engineer known around the office as the Cold Wall. He rarely spoke, never argued, never debated, and yet he was never dismissed. Once, during a meeting, a colleague kept mocking his ideas with sarcastic jabs, some bordering on personal insult. The entire room anticipated a comeback. But he simply looked at the man for a few seconds, gave a quiet nod, and turned back to his slides, continuing his presentation without a flicker of change in expression. That single nod carried more weight than 100 words, because it said not only, "I heard you," but also, "You don't control me." And that is what agitators can't tolerate, the fact that they can't shake you. Seneca once wrote, "He who has learned to be silent has learned the greatest lesson from pain." Silence is not avoidance, but a conscious choice to stay out of meaningless battles. Because you can't both protect your inner worth and chase down every flame someone lights out of malice or envy. You have to choose. And most of the time, choosing silence is choosing yourself. But to do that, you must train your mind to be steady as a rock amid waves. You must stop treating every criticism as a threat and start seeing them as stones tossed into a pond. They only stir the surface if the water is restless. When your inner state is calm, external noise cannot disturb you. You don't need to cover your ears, only to stop giving it your attention. The problem is, we often fall silent out of pain, not mastery. But Stoic silence is not the silence of surrender. It is the silence of someone who sees clearly. You don't speak, not because you've lost, but because you've chosen not to fight a pointless battle. You say nothing, not because you lack the wit to respond, but because you have the wisdom not to waste your time. Once I received a harshly critical email from someone on the same project. Instead of replying immediately, I let it sit. I reread it the next day, once my emotions had cooled, and I realized every line of that email wasn't a reflection of me. It was an expression of unresolved frustration from the sender. I didn't respond with arguments. I sent a progress report, clear, concise, no complaints, no innuendos. And then the email stopped. Silence, when used rightly, doesn't strip you of your voice. It reinforces your control. While others drain their energy provoking you, you conserve yours to move forward. And when they grow tired from shouting into a void, you'll still have strength left to keep going. Not every attack deserves a reply. Not every insult needs resolving. Some words, when met with silence, dissolve into thin air because they find nothing to cling to. And once you learn that, you become not only stronger, but freer. For let your actions speak. Sometimes, the quiet act of continuing to do what you believe is right echoes louder than any speech. In a world where everyone is fighting to be heard, the one who quietly works, quietly advances, becomes the one people can't ignore. Not because they're trying to impress anyone, but because they don't need to. You don't need to argue with those who don't believe in you. You don't need to spend hours debating with people who never intended to understand. The more you explain, the harder they try to poke holes in your reasons. But if you keep moving forward, if you turn their doubt into tangible results, then in the end, your work will say everything you didn't. I remember a former classmate. Back in college, he was mocked for choosing to study subjects no one cared about: sustainable development, social modeling, community psychology. "What are you going to eat with that degree?" someone once joked in class. He didn't answer, didn't argue, didn't explain that he had a longer vision. He just kept learning, researching, collaborating. 10 years later, I saw him on the cover of a magazine featuring young leaders in social transformation. Those who once laughed at him now shared the article as if they'd believed in him all along. We are often tempted to react immediately. When looked down on, our first reflex is to prove ourselves. But proving through words is fragile. People will always find another reason to doubt you. Only results are undeniable. A completed project, a product you've built, a skill you've mastered. These are living proofs, no subtitles needed. Epictetus once said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." That isn't just a moral reminder, it's a practical directive. When you let actions speak instead of words, you no longer rely on others' approval to feel secure. You build your foundation on reality, not validation. Those who live to prove themselves must be accepted to exist. Those who live through action already exist and may be accepted or not. And you must ask yourself, do you want to be applauded for speaking right, or respected for quietly building something real? I saw this clearly while working at a startup. There was a young employee, quiet, never speaking during ego-filled debates among team leads. People assumed he was passive. But after 3 months, we realized most of the company's most efficient systems were things he had quietly proposed and tested first. No credit claimed, no spotlight needed, just results that spoke. And when it came time to choose someone to lead a strategic project, the boss didn't pick the loudest speaker. He chose the one with the clearest track record. That was a powerful lesson. Silence does not mean invisibility. Doing more than you say does not make you weak. You can stand behind the curtain and still run the show if what you build carries real weight. No one can deny your presence when your impact is clear. You don't need to shout, "I'm good at this." You don't need to defend or please. You just need to keep going. And then at some point, maybe next year, maybe in 5, people won't ask, "Why did you do that?" But "How did you do that?" And in that moment, you'll realize you never needed them to believe in you from the start. You just needed to believe in yourself long enough to keep acting. 5. Boundaries are protection, not coldness. Some relationships don't end in arguments, but in the quiet creation of distance, not for revenge, but for recovery. One day you wake up and realize, if you keep allowing others to touch your core values without question, you'll slowly lose respect for yourself. And that's when you must set a boundary, not to keep others out, but to keep yourself intact. We are often taught that silence is weakness, that distance means a lack of care, that stepping back is failure. But no one tells you this. If you don't set limits, someone will always cross them, not because they're cruel, but because they've never been shown where the line is unless you draw it. I once had a friend I'd known since high school. We shared everything, from naive dreams to hidden fears. But when I began to change, to live with more intention, what I received in return were jokes. Getting all philosophical now, huh? Like anyone needs your inspiration. I laughed it off, tried to explain, tried to be gentle until I realized I was forcing myself to maintain a relationship that made me feel smaller every time I left it. When I chose to step back, I said no harsh words. I simply stopped explaining, stopped showing up in places where being myself felt like a mistake. And surprisingly, I didn't feel as lonely as I feared. I felt lighter, as if I had reclaimed the energy I'd been draining for years, trying to be understood, accepted, held on to. Boundaries are not coldness, they are clarity. They say, I can respect you without letting you harm me. They also say, I can step back without disappearing. Boundaries don't destroy relationships, they preserve the ones worth keeping. Epictetus once wrote, "The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have." If you keep maintaining ties with people who don't respect you just because you're afraid of upsetting them, then you've handed control of your life to their emotions. And no one deserves that power except you. Watch how others react when you start setting boundaries. Those who truly value you will adjust to avoid hurting you. Those who only want to keep control will get angry, criticize, or manipulate you with guilt. And that is the clearest answer you need. Because someone who respects you won't be offended by your boundaries. I know people who remain in passive, draining relationships just because of long history or they were there when things were tough. But don't confuse gratitude with resignation. You can honor the past without imprisoning yourself in it. You can acknowledge someone who once helped you and still walk away if they no longer treat you right. Loyalty does not mean abandoning your self-worth. And if you're still hesitant to set boundaries because you're afraid of being seen as difficult, remember this: everything in nature has boundaries. The ocean has a shore, the desert has edges, the earth has its atmosphere, and humans too need boundaries to protect their minds, their energy, and their dignity. Those who don't know how to say enough will forever live in cycles of hurt. Boundaries don't make you lose people. They reveal who's truly willing to stay, and once you understand that, you'll stop fearing loss. Instead, you'll learn to protect. Protect your self-respect, your healthy relationships, and your right to emotional sovereignty. Remember, you don't need to shout to be heard, nor sacrifice yourself to be kept. Sometimes, a clear step back is a powerful declaration. I deserve better than this. 6. Turn rejection into fuel. There's a strange kind of energy. It doesn't come from encouragement or applause. It comes from skeptical glances, blunt remarks, from others not believing in you. That's right. Rejection, when seen through the right lens, can become the strongest fuel for moving forward. When someone says, "You can't do that," you have two choices. One is to let that sentence hit your self-worth and make you shrink. The other is to store it not as a wound, but as a reminder, so that when you grow tired, you remember you're not only doing this for yourself, but to prove that no one but you defines your limits. I once met a new hire, young, inexperienced, but with a refreshingly independent view of problems. In his first team meeting, he shared a bold idea. The team lead dismissed it with a casual, "That idea's still too raw." The room fell silent. He didn't argue, just nodded and took notes. 3 months later, that very idea, refined and quietly tested, helped the team surpass all yearly KPIs. The team lead never mentioned it again, but he didn't need to. The results spoke for themselves. Rejection cannot stop you unless you believe it. Stoics know this well. You can't control what others think or say, but you control how you use it. A harsh comment can be the end if you let it, or it can be a spark if you turn it into action. Seneca once said, "Hardship doesn't break the mind, it trains it." Just as your body needs resistance to grow stronger, your mind needs pressure to grow steadier. And sometimes, other people's doubt is the purest form of resistance, not because they understand you, but because they don't. And in that misunderstanding lies your chance to define yourself. I'm not saying you should live to prove others wrong. That would keep you trapped in comparison and bitterness. But I do believe that a bit of doubt, when received with the right mindset, sharpens your focus, strengthens your will, and builds a deeper drive than any praise ever could. I've kept an email for years. It's from an old boss who once wrote, "I don't think you have what it takes to lead any team." I never replied, but whenever I felt tired, ready to quit, I'd read it again, not out of anger, but as a reminder, only I get to write the final verdict about myself. Today, I lead a small team not through sharp words, but through the quiet strength forged from those very rejections. Your job isn't to prove who's right or wrong, but to shift focus. Instead of reacting emotionally to criticism, turn it into momentum. Instead of immediate replies, choose consistent, silent action. And instead of resentment, choose gratitude, because the words "you can't" often open the door for "I am." In the end, what silences doubt isn't a clever comeback. It's a journey walked far enough that you no longer need to turn around. Remember, being dismissed by others is not a period, it's a comma. You decide how the story continues. And if you know how to use rejection as fuel, even the harshest words can become a launching point, helping you go farther, deeper, and stronger than ever before. 7. The environment you choose is the future you create. There's a truth we often underestimate. You can be hardworking, disciplined, and full of ambition, but if you place yourself in the wrong environment, you'll slowly fade without knowing why. Not because you're not good enough, but because you're stifling your growth in a place that won't let you thrive. Every seed holds potential, but only when planted in the right soil, with the right climate and the right light. Humans are no different. We become the version of ourselves silently shaped by our surroundings. The stories you hear every day, the words people speak to you when you're feeling low, the way they react to your success or failure, they're like streams of water slowly soaking into your mind. And then one day you start thinking, maybe I should quit. Not because you've run out of energy, but because you live among those who make you believe it's not worth trying anymore. I once knew a woman named Emma. As a new designer at her company, she was passionate and often proposed bold ideas. But every week in team meetings, someone would dismiss her suggestions with a smirk or a backhanded joke. Sounds a bit unrealistic, huh? No one outright attacked her, but no one encouraged her either. Every time she spoke up, the room fell into awkward silence. After 3 months, she started saying less. Not because she ran out of ideas, but because she had learned that in that space, creativity was seen as a nuisance. Then Emma switched to another team, where the culture was every idea gets heard before being judged. Within weeks, she returned to her original energy, even grew faster, surrounded by people who shared her hunger for growth. It wasn't Emma who changed, it was her environment. And that new space unlocked a version of herself she once doubted even existed. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. So be careful whom you allow near you." In today's world, that's not just true, it's urgent. When you live around people who mock new beginnings, you'll fear starting. When you surround yourself with chronic skeptics, you'll start doubting yourself. And when you're always near those who quietly envy your growth, you'll start feeling guilty every time you rise. Stoicism doesn't teach us to depend on others, but it also doesn't encourage enduring alone in a toxic space. Self-reliance isn't isolation. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." But he also advised, seek the company of those striving to be wise. Stoics are not closed off, they are discerning, because they understand those around you today will quietly shape who you become 5 years from now. If you want to live with dignity, be near those who inspire you to live better, not by pressure, but by example. If you want to stay committed, choose people who remind you why you started, especially when you feel like quitting. And if you're on a journey to become a stronger version of yourself, have the courage to leave the places that shrink you just to fit into someone else's smallness. Remember, the right people don't make you feel smaller. They make you believe you can be more. And when you surround yourself with people like that, you don't just gain strength, you start becoming a source of strength for others. You can't control your starting point, but you can choose who stands beside you in the journey. Every person you keep or release, every space you step into or walk away from is a decision about your future. Because in the end, you grow not just from effort, but from the place you allow yourself to belong. 8. You have value. You don't need anyone's permission to know it. There's a subtle mistake many people make. They live as if their worth only becomes valid once someone else confirms it. They wait for a compliment to feel they've done something right. They need a look of approval to keep believing in their path. They hand others the power to grant them a sense of fullness, and then wonder why they always feel empty. But the truth is, your value doesn't come from recognition. It comes from the awareness of the person you're striving to become. Others may agree or disagree. They may support you or doubt you. But that doesn't change the fact that you are trying every day, in silence, to surpass who you were yesterday. We live in a world shaped by judgment. Every action, every choice, even every silence can be interpreted. And if you don't have a firm foundation within, you'll constantly reshape yourself to fit the shifting standards outside. You'll become a leaf caught in the winds of public opinion, soaring when praised, crashing when struck by one careless remark. That's a life without center, without axis, and nothing drains you faster than that. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The worth of a man is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." He wasn't talking about perfection or achievement or popularity. He meant the intention to live rightly, to live with dignity, to not settle for mediocrity. And if that's the direction you're moving toward, then you already have worth, even if no one says it out loud. I once worked with a colleague named Rachel. She wasn't a great speaker, nor the most charismatic in team meetings, but she was always the first to arrive, double-checked every detail in the presentation, and quietly fixed everyone's mistakes without ever asking for credit. One time, after she presented a critical report, our manager simply nodded and moved on, offering no recognition. That night I texted her, "Were you disappointed?" Rachel replied, "A bit, but I know what I did mattered. That's enough to keep going." Her reply stayed with me for a long time. Because it wasn't a denial of emotion, she admitted the sadness, but at the same time, she refused to hand others the power to define her worth. She didn't need applause to keep living with integrity. True self-respect is quiet. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't bargain to stay. It stands firm even in moments of invisibility. And strangely enough, when you live that way, others begin to sense your value, even when you're not trying to show it. You don't need to shrink just to make others comfortable. You don't need to change your ideals because someone says they're too lofty. And you certainly don't need permission to be yourself. If you do what's right, live with principle, treat others with respect, and keep learning, then your existence already has value, whether others recognize it or not. Stoicism doesn't tell you to ignore the world. It teaches you to face it with all its chaos, judgment, and bias, and still hold your inner calm. It reminds you that recognition comes and goes, but self-respect is something you can keep if you build it on right action and right thinking. Remember this: you don't have to be great to have value. You just have to keep becoming a little more kind, courageous, and honest than you were yesterday. And that journey, whether silent or unseen, is the clearest proof of your worth. Because in the end, the only person who gets to define you is you. And once you stop letting others hold the pen to your story, you'll realize Your true worth doesn't lie in how others see you, but in how you've lived even when no one was watching. I used to live in a state of trying to be enough in the eyes of others, good enough, smart enough, kind enough, successful enough. But the more I tried, the more I lost myself. It took me a long time to realize. Recognition should never be the goal, it's merely a byproduct when you live with integrity. When you stop chasing acceptance, you free yourself to build character. When you stop explaining who you are, you begin becoming your most honest self. And when you find the courage to set boundaries, to stay silent when needed, to act instead of argue, you don't just protect yourself, you teach others how to treat you. I no longer live to be acknowledged. I live not to betray myself, and that's what frees me from every judgmental gaze. If what you heard today made you feel lighter, stronger, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss future content. And remember, you don't need anyone to give you your worth. You only need the courage to hold on to it in each quiet, steady step you take. See you in the next video.